Hello and welcome. I'm Saurav Agarwal, and today we are going to talk about outliers. What are outliers? How do we deal with identifiers? But more importantly, how do we identify outliers in our data set? Right? So let us begin. First of all, we need to understand what outliers are. So, understand from a simple sense. Say, for example, you have a class of students where the average age of students is 20 years and it ranges between 18 years to 21, 22 years, right? Now, in that particular class, an individual of the age of 75 years is present, assuming that is a student and not the teacher, then that is an outlier, right? So among the students whose average age is 20 years, you find a particular student or the age of a particular student which is 75 years. That is quite strange and that is different from the normal data set, right? So that is what an outlier is. To talk of theoretically, those are the values within a data set that vary greatly from others. And outliers can distort the behavior of a machine learning model. Let us understand now how do we determine outliers. The first and foremost technique to identify outliers is using IQR. IQR it means interquartile range. You must have or read about percentiles, right? Percentile, the difference between the 75th percentile and the 25th percentile of a data distribution is known as interquartile range, and any data point which is lying 1.5 times of the outlier on either extreme, 1.5 times of the IQR on either extreme is an outlier. The other technique that we know of is using scatter plot. Scatter plots, as you can see in the image, this is a scatter plot, and in a scatter plot, we represent data points as as a point in the coordinate space, and the point which is far off or way off from the normal cluster or normal distribution of the data is an outlier. However, scatter plots do have a disadvantage that it is difficult to visualize data points beyond two-dimensional space. At max, we can visualize data points in three-dimensional space, but beyond that, it is difficult to identify using the visualization technique of scatter plot. Also, when we talked of IQR, there is an important underlying thing that box plots. The plot which you can see in the image here, this is the box plot, and box plot uses the underlying concept of IQR to determine both the outliers as well as present the distribution of the data. Right? Sorry, the upper and the data points which are beyond 1.5 times the IQR are the outliers, right? Next up, the another technique is the Z score. Z scores are the distance from the mean of a standard norm in a standard normal distribution. When we talked of this data distributions, the various probability distributions, we talked of the standard normal distribution. So any data distribution represented as a standard normal distribution and the data point of whose is beyond three standard deviations on either side of the mean is also considered as an outlier. And the last technique that we use is the DB scan, or the density based special clustering of applications with noise. It is one of the clustering techniques, and we discussed about this technique when we talked of hierarchical clustering. I'll attach the links to the videos with the I button above. Okay, so these are four primary techniques using which we determine outliers. Hope you have a clear understanding of how do we determine outliers, because it is very important from the perspective of understanding what outliers are and how do we mathematically as well as visually determine outliers in a data set. Understanding this, we'll now talk of how do we manage outliers. So before we talk of managing outliers, we must understand that outliers could primarily occur due to two reasons in our data set. The first reason is that it could naturally occur in our data set. Say for example, the individuals appearing or the UPSC aspirants appearing for the UPSC mains exam. The age of the individuals could vary, say starting from 21 years to 28 years. However, there are certain individuals whose age is 35 years. Clearly, is an outlier, but that is a naturally occurring outlier and it is very much possible. However, certain outliers occur due to human errors or measurement errors. such as measuring the gravitational force or the value of G, which is 9.8 approximately. Someone records the value of G as 10.8. Clearly, that is a human error or a measurement error. So those are the two types of outliers we have: naturally occurring and those that occur due to certain error. When we have to manage outliers, we need to keep into mind these two different reasons because of which outliers occur, and depending on the problem that we are solving, it is noteworthy to consider outliers differently. In a particular case, we would want to drop an outlier, especially when we are certain that the outlier is due to a human error or a measurement error. However, in other cases, it is convenient to utilize the outliers and preserve the distribution as it is. I hope you understand what outliers are, how do we determine outliers, and how do we manage outliers. Thank you very much for attending the lecture. Hope you had a good time, learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next lecture. Have a nice day. Bye bye.